Hello everybody, King Charles says hey. Scarlett says hey too, she's right below me on the floor. So this video is a Patreon request today from Mike Lavoie. He basically said you mentioned wanting to learn more about the House of Habsburg. Now I can't even recall which video it was in the past where that came up, the House of Habsburg, but I do remember commenting on how I don't know anything about it. It just seemed like the Habsburgs were all over the place. And you guys in the comments were like, you have no idea. So that is definitely something that I have yet to learn about. And also King Charles II was a Spanish king, which still kind of blows my mind because when I think of the name Charles, I don't associate it with Spain for some reason. Maybe it's just complete ignorance on my part. I would pair Charles with England or France before I would do Spain. But again, it's probably just ignorance of where the name Charles comes from. But this should be interesting because I don't know anything about King Charles II. I don't know a ton of Spanish history. I've not done a lot of videos on Spain on my channel yet, with the exception of like the Civil War video that I did a few months back. And I have no idea which war they're talking about in Europe or what time period this is set in, so all of this is going to be brand new information for me. So hopefully I'll learn a little bit more about Europe and a little bit more about Spain in this video. Speaking of that, this video is from the channel Weird History. I don't think I've done any videos from their channel yet. They've got a lot of subscribers, so hopefully it'll be good. And you guys can go check out their channel if you like this video as well. So with that, let's learn a little bit more about King Charles.
Charles II lived from 1661 to 1700. He was the last of the Spanish Habsburgs, a powerful dynasty that eventually killed itself off through too much inbreeding. He could barely eat because of his disfigured jaw. He suffered from rickets, hallucinations, and an oversized head. He was impotent and infertile. Charles II of Spain, king of one of the largest empires in the world, was so inbred he was barely able to talk or walk, and it cost his kingdom.
Oh my gosh.
Today, we're going to take a look at how the health problems of Charles II of Spain destroyed his dynasty and plunged Europe into war. Okay, so let's head back to old España. In the 16th and 17th centuries, Spain was ruled by kings of the House of Habsburg. At various times, the monarchy held power over a vast empire that included territory in the Low Countries, Belgium, and Luxembourg, as well as territories in what today would be Germany, Italy, France, and even North Africa.
Wow.
Under the Habsburgs, Spain would be the dominant military and political power in Europe for 200 years, and would experience something of a golden age with respect to literature and the arts, producing writers like Miguel de Cervantes and painters like El Greco. Despite their great success as rulers of Spain, generations of inbreeding left the Habsburg gene pool in a less than optimal state, and Charles II likely suffered for it. How bad was it? Well, a description of Charles's family tree sounds more like a family stump. Two of Charles's great-grandfathers married their own nieces, while another married his first cousin. Because his parents were closely related, Charles was also his own mother's first cousin and his father's great-nephew.
I'm not even...
I'll let you mull on that
Yeah, I'm not even gonna try to figure that out.
for a second. Okay. His grandmother was also his aunt. In fact, Charles's entire family tree traced back to a single couple, Philip and Joanna of Castile, who lived in the 16th century. The incestuous DNA meant that Charles likely suffered from two genetic disorders, both pretty serious. The first was combined pituitary hormone deficiency. Caused by a mutation in the gene necessary to produce hormones in the pituitary gland, it was responsible for Charles's short stature, infertility, and impotence. It also may have caused him to have weak muscles and a few digestive problems. The second disorder was distal renal tubular acidosis. Caused by a gene mutation, this condition makes it difficult for the kidneys to get rid of acid through the urine. That would have led to bloody urine, weak muscles, and a large head relative to the size of the body.
So, I mean, I think humans understood inbreeding going back thousands of years, so were they aware of what was happening in their own family as far as all of these health issues? Or were they completely clueless? You know, and they just didn't care. And also, what was the purpose of inbreeding with them? Was it just them to secure their dynasty? Is that basically why they did it?
Given that he was the king, painters of the era made every effort to depict Charles II as a healthy, strong man, hiding the truth of the ruler's physical conditions. Though you would never know it from their work, Charles suffered from epileptic seizures that grew increasingly worse as he got older. He was also constantly plagued by diseases, including measles, rubella, a plethora of dental and bronchial infections, frequent diarrhea, and vomiting. He also had the famous Habsburg jaw. This jutting jaw made it nearly impossible for Charles to chew his own food.
Oh my gosh.
According to a British envoy, Alexander Stanhope, Charles II swallowed all he ate whole. Because his lower jaw stood out so much, his 2 rows of teeth couldn't meet.
Oh my
Despite the
gosh.
bad dental work, Charles was apparently a catch. He married twice, first at the age of 18 and then again at 29. However, he was unable to have children either time. One of his wives even complained that Charles was impotent, which makes sense for someone with these conditions. By his 30s, Charles reportedly looked like an old man, which probably didn't help with his esteem that much. In 1698, French ambassador Marc d'Harcourt wrote to Louis XIV reporting that Charles had swollen feet, legs, abdomen, face, and sometimes even his tongue, so that he cannot speak, and he was so weak that he could not be out of bed for more than 1 or 2 hours. Charles struggled with so many physical ailments, he garnered the title of the Bewitched, and the reputation extended even after his death. The royal court even performed a post-mortem examination, which was uncommon for most royals. Charles II, however, was a rare exception. According to the autopsy, the bewitched king had a very small heart of the size of a grain of pepper, the lungs corroded, the intestines putrefactive and gangrenous, in the kidney 3 large stones, a single testicle as black as coal, and his head full of water. I'm not a doctor, but that sounds like a bad report. These findings seem like they may have been exaggerated, but at the very minimum, it gives you a good sense of his reputation among his contemporaries. When Charles was born in 1661, it's likely his parents thought he wouldn't live very long. Contemporary writings describe the baby big-headed and a weak breastfed baby. Don't babies all have big heads? Nonetheless, the baby survived. Charles didn't speak until he turned 4 years old, and he was unable to walk until the age of 8. In spite of all the paintings that tried to show him as a healthy baby, Charles was actually weak and ailing from the moment he was born. According to Jacques Sanguin, an envoy for King Louis XIV sent to confirm the baby's sex, amid rumors that he was not a male heir, Charles seemed extremely weak. He reported the boy had a herpes-type rash on both cheeks, that his head was covered with scabs, and that below his right ear a type of suppurating duct or drainage had formed. This unhealthy child inherited the Spanish throne at the age of 4 when his father died. But even his own family doubted that he could ever rule alone, and his mother became the boy's regent. There's never really a great time to be a peasant, but the 17th century was particularly bad for those who fell into that category. Agricultural production dropped, famine destroyed communities, and epidemics swept across Europe. Good times. But the peasants were still better off than the Spanish Habsburgs, in one very important way. They weren't killing themselves from intentional inbreeding. Charles's father, King Philip IV, was only 10 years old when his parents arranged his first marriage to the daughter of the French king. Out of their 8 children, only 2 were boys, and both died before inheriting the throne. After the death of his first wife, Philip remarried his own niece, Mariana of Austria. The couple had 2 daughters and 2 more sons, who died as children. Between 1527 and 1661, the year Charles II was born, the Spanish royal families produced 34 children. Nearly 30% of them died before the age of 1, and a full half died before their 10th birthdays. Shockingly, one of the wealthiest families in the world suffered from worse mortality rates than the average Spanish commoner, whose infant mortality was around 20%. That's the cost of keeping it in the family. Inbreeding was common practice for Europe's royalty, although when they did it, it was referred to as royal intermarriage. Sounds classy and corporate. And for 2 centuries, the Spanish Habsburgs married within their family to maintain their royal heritage. In fact, the vast majority of their marriages during the 16th and 17th centuries were between blood relatives. The Habsburgs justified their inbreeding by claiming the practice strengthened lines of succession and helped secure political alliances. During an era when royal blood was considered substantially different from common blood, rulers wanted to marry other rulers.
Wow.
The simple fact was, though, sometimes there weren't many options outside of one's own cousins. Ironically, the practice of intermarriage, meant to ensure the purity of the bloodline, ultimately brought a host of genetic ailments and deformities that destroyed the monarchy. That's some poor planning. Charles inherited a massive empire that dated back to the 16th century, when his ancestor, Charles V, had ruled over Germany, Austria, the Netherlands, Spain, and an enormous amount of territory.
How is there a Charles V before Charles II? How does that work?
Charles V had ruled over Germany, Austria, the Netherlands, Spain, and an enormous amount of territory in the New World. His vast holdings were described as the empire on which the sun never sets, a title later appropriated by the British Empire. Wealth poured into Spain through its major port city, Seville. Don Quixote author Miguel de Cervantes described the city at the time as just the place to find adventure, for in every street and on every street corner there were more adventures than in any other place. Spain's transatlantic fleet appeared twice a year carrying gold and silver along with exotic luxury goods like cocoa, pineapples, and chili peppers.
So that was interesting about Don Quixote. That's one book that I would like to read. I would like to read all of the classics, you know, at some point in my life. And so that is definitely one of the classics. And I didn't know that it was set during the age of the Spanish Empire. So that's actually a really good contextual background to have going into that. Literature is one of the things I thought about adding to my channel as far as, you know, it's another great subject to learn about. And this right here shows how you can kind of like tie in literature with history a little bit too, which is pretty cool.
Gold and silver along with exotic luxury goods like cocoa, pineapples, and chili peppers. But in the end, it didn't matter. All of the Spanish Empire's wealth couldn't prevent the end of the Habsburg monarchy. In the 17th century, Spain found itself facing a long, steep decline. While millions of pounds of silver flooded the country between 1580 and 1630, the massive amounts the Spanish Empire brought into the European market caused extreme inflation for the Spanish currency. The monarchy took on enormous amounts of debt while funding a multitude of war efforts in both Europe and the Americas. So things were looking bad. But it was poor leadership from the Habsburgs that ultimately made these problems insurmountable. The king was simply incapable of ruling his empire, and it would never again reach the heights of the 16th century. For anybody paying attention, it was pretty clear that Charles was not going to live very long. And as it happened, he had no children of his own. So, in 1700, Charles issued his last will and testament. In the document, Charles chose Philip, Duke of Anjou, as his successor. Philip was the grandson of Charles's sister, who had married Louis XIV of France. You would think this sort of foresight and planning would assure a smooth succession, but it didn't. Charles's death led to years of war. Charles was the last of the Spanish Habsburgs, and because of Spain's rich empire, a number of other European powers wanted to seize the throne. In fact, before Charles was even dead, the English, Dutch, and French were already debating how to carve up his empire. The conflict, which would be known as the War of the Spanish Succession, dragged on from 1701 until 1713.
I've heard of that war before. Okay, now I have some context for what it was about. Because I've heard the name, you know, War of the Spanish Succession. I had no idea what it was, you know, all about. So, okay.
This decade of war saw the powerful French monarch Louis XIV fight against an alliance of the English, Dutch, and the Holy Roman Empire to put his grandson on the throne. Ultimately, the war killed more than 1 million people, and in the end, put a French Bourbon on the Spanish throne.
Alright, so basically, the war they were talking about was the War of the Spanish Succession, which started in 1701. It lasted for about a decade, he said. And so it looked like it was France versus, I think he said the English and the Dutch, and I forgot what the other Holy Roman Empire, all fighting for the throne of Spain. So what happened to King Philip? Did they just kill him or something? Was he that weak of a ruler to where he, you know, wasn't able to hold on to the empire and the throne, I guess? You know, the saying that power corrupts, it definitely holds true with this video. 1 million people had to die because of the greed of a few who wanted to acquire the Spanish Empire and claim the throne. And these poor innocent people who just got mixed up in all of that. It's just crazy to think about, actually. But, you know, that's what most wars are like, I guess. I also learned more about the Habsburgs. Obviously, I would like to learn more about them. I mean, this video just kind of touched on it briefly, but I have a better understanding of who they were, and I had no idea that they were inbred. So, obviously this video also answered my questions. They did it intentionally. Now, whether or not they knew the health consequences of it is another thing. Like, I still don't know. It sounded like they believed in some like superstitious royal blood's different from peasant blood, so we're not gonna have that problem. I don't know, but you would think that they would notice they were having problems and then maybe like go a different direction. But again, it's like that power. They wanted to acquire dynasty, I guess. They wanted to keep it in the family, and that desire, you know, overcame common sense, basically. Really cool video, Mike. Really appreciate you suggesting it. I definitely learned quite a bit in this pretty short video, and I hope that you guys enjoyed it as well. Maybe you learned something, and if you already knew all of this stuff, maybe teach me something down in the comments if you want to expand on anything down there, or answer my questions too. I would appreciate it. And also, if you enjoyed this video, make sure to like and subscribe. If you want to check out any of my social media, or if you're interested in contacting me, you'll find all of those links in the description and pinned comments. I also have a Patreon, which is where this video request came from. I do a lot of reactions to TV shows and movies over there that I can't do here on YouTube, so there's a lot more content over there. If you're interested in checking that out, the Patreon link is in the description and the pinned comment. I also have a PO box if you're looking for that. It's in the description, and I have a Star Trek podcast for all of you Trekkies out there. You'll find that link in the description and pinned comment as well. King Roger here, and I thank you guys for watching as always, and we'll see you next time.